Welcome to the Pickup Korea podcast. And today, the topic I want to cover is going from beginner to intermediate. So, a lot of guys, they're doing this for many years and they're not really getting many results or very random, sporadic results. They keep doing the same things, expecting a different result. Then you have other guys who start out, at a beginner level, but they end up overcoming the things that are holding them back, and they end up reaching more of an adequate level. So I figured it'd be very useful to discuss sort of the main issues and main things that beginners are experiencing, and perhaps they know they're doing it wrong or they don't know, and those things, what they look like more at an adequate, intermediate kind of phase. So one of the main things is, first of all, is having interactions that are kind of directionless or on the other end of it, too scripted. So one thing that I see a lot with guys is they go into these interactions and they have this whole routine or script, and it's like it's the same opener and the same topic right after the opener and the same joke and the same question or something like that. And that can be okay as a beginner because you're just trying to get some social experience, and the first week or the first month or something, maybe, perhaps not ideal, but better than nothing, right? Getting some experience getting in there. But it just becomes very robotic. It's not calibrated to the situation and the girl. It's not an interaction, really. It's just a one way, almost like a performance or something, right? So, yeah, too scripted is definitely a huge issue I see. On the other end, though, you also have very directionless, leaf in the wind interactions where there's like no no direction in it, no moving the interaction forward. It is, vibing and stuff like that, talking about random topics, but it's almost like the girl starts leading the interaction, or there's just no idea of how to make the interaction go from one step to another. So that's another really big issue. So once you reach more of an adequate level at this and overcome these issues that I'm talking about, the interaction is not going to be scripted. There might be some, there's going to be similar topics or similar observations or similar questions here and there, but it'll be more organic. It'll be more dependent on the girl, dependent on the situation, dependent on what you're thinking at the time, and really with an eye for how she's reacting or how she feels, or really more of a two-way thing rather than a one-way, scripted performance, right? And then at the same time, you kind of know how or when it's appropriate to move the interaction forward. At what moments it's appropriate to maybe go for a phone number. You're not, that's another thing. Like a lot of guys, they're rushing for the phone number. They go in the interaction, they say their lines. Oh, by the way, can I get your number? Or, oh, we should keep in touch, rather than actually having an interaction. The number should be a summation, it should be the result of a good interaction, or it should be a natural, really, at the end of a discussion together, rather than just you're rushing for it within a minute. Although that being said, there's going to be times where the chick's in a rush, or there's just a situation where there is no time. Maybe you have no time. So that being said, there'll be times where you can only do a minute interaction, but overall, it should be more of an interaction that ends in a number rather than one that rushes to one, right? That's a big issue too. Another issue I see is way too much intent. Like students or beginners will go in there and be very, very intentful, very direct, and like the whole time, strong eye contact, and like almost too overbearing in the level of intent they're displaying, where it might start out okay, and she might be, wow, this guy, she might be taken back by the confidence, but then it slowly starts going downhill because she's like, yeah, this is too much. This is too weird, right? Or too much pressure or something like that. So you have that end. Then you also have the other end where it's very scared, very timid, no intent, right? And so really what you see as at an adequate level would be a very balance between showing intent at the right time, showing that you're a man, showing that you're interested, flirting, vibing at the right moments, and not the whole interaction, and not being dickless the whole interaction at the same time too, right? So that's a big thing, is balancing out the intent and when you're displaying it. That's a huge one, I would say. Another thing would be what I notice is a lack of leadership, lack of compliance. So with a lot of the guys that are approaching at a beginner level, they don't even really have an understanding of compliance and what it means to, you know, to move the interaction forward, to get her moving with you, to bounce her somewhere, to move her to grabbing a drink, to move her around in the environment and things along those lines. So understanding compliance really starts at the beginning all the way through the interaction, perhaps a date or an insta date, all the way to the end. So really, testing out compliance, building up positive compliance, and even understanding the psychology of it, where a lot of students, they'll be on a negative compliant situation and they'll just keep asking questions, or they don't realize that at certain thresholds when, she's not moving over here, or it's not really working out on what you're trying to do, they'll just keep asking questions and keep trying again, versus vibing, versus getting back in the interaction, building the vibe back up, and then trying again, right? So a lack of understanding of compliance is a huge, huge thing. That's a very, very big thing. One thing in Korea specifically I see is guys that will, never learn Korean. So they want to approach a bunch of very, very attractive girls, but then, realizing that a lot of those really hot ones don't speak any English, and they just keep trying to speak in very fluent English, very academic, professor speak to a girl that speaks zero English. And this is a huge one, like not understanding your audience, not understanding the girl situation, her world, her level of communication, and just coming in at the wrong rhythm, coming in at the wrong form of communication, the wrong language, the wrong culture, and not really calibrating, verbally, culturally, or even psychologically to the chick. That is a huge one. And so, yeah, in Korea, you don't really need to learn Korean. However, does it help? Yes. Will it help a lot? Yes. Will you lose out on many girls? Just lose out on good interactions in general without knowing Korean? For sure. That's a big thing. And do a lot of the really, really good looking ones not speak English? Yeah. So that alone, if you're living in Korea or, plan to date Koreans, it is very useful to learn the language, the culture, things like that. So, um, okay, another one. This is another big one. I noticed that a lot of the beginner guys, they are very afraid of silences or pauses. So what they'll do is they'll laugh very nervously or say like, okay, 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 yeah, 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 yeah. Things like this in between the interactions, or okay, yeah, you like that, or they'll just keep talking, these random words, random phrases, or random laughs in between the moments of silence, in between the questions, in between the answers of what's going on in the conversation. And so that's a very, very big thing to getting, removing your verbal tics, and also being comfortable with there being some pauses and gaps. That is a very, very big thing. And also being comfortable with tension, being comfortable building tension, not being the first one to break the silence or break the tension that's building up in the interaction. That is a huge one. So once you're at an adequate level, you kind of understand that those pauses, those gaps of silence are good, and you want there to be a degree of that in the interaction. Okay, so that is a big one. Another one is really a lack of awareness in the situation. So wherever the guy is approaching, how he's approaching, a lack of awareness of the surroundings, lack of awareness of the girl's situation, and sort of approaching the same way every time, rather than at an adequate level, really adjusting the approach. It's never going to be perfect, but adjusting as best as possible in the situation to approaching the girl in a way that you get her attention, but that it's comfortable for her to engage with you, rather than being, stuck up against a wall, or, feeling encroached on or cut off in traffic, or whatever, it may be. So yeah, that's a big one. And so yeah, once you reach adequate level, you kind of you approach in a way that you understand the girl's situation and the general situation around the environment around her. Okay. There's another one that it just came to mind, is that a lot of guys will also approach and they'll get laughs and they'll get smiles and corny reactions, and they think that, wow, that means I'm doing well. She's eating it up. She's into it. However, a degree of laughing or a degree of, funny banter or whatnot is good, but that really does not mean anything, really. Going back to earlier, compliance is more, is she participating in the interaction? Is she attentive? Is she investing? Is she compliant? These are more what you can judge the interaction on. It has nothing to do with, corny laughs or anything like that. Is there tension? Things like that, right? But misunderstanding her laughing, she could be laughing at you, right? Because it's like a dancing monkey kind of thing. Might be laughing at you, might not be attracted with this interaction, right? So that's a very, very big one. Okay, so another big one is that your results are very inconsistent. You might go out one day for, you do tons of approaches, maybe 30 approaches, 20 approaches, and, there's just not a very consistent level of getting a phone number or even having good interactions or getting dates out of it versus, at an adequate level, you go out for a longer session, you should at least get a date out of it or two, or an Insta date poll or something like that, right? I'm not saying it happens every time. There might be some days you go out at an adequate level that it happens pretty much every time. It doesn't happen sometimes, or happens 2 to 3 times in one session, right? So nonetheless, there are results. You can kind of expect them to come as long as you're, executing the program. Versus at a more beginner level, it's sort of few and far in between, almost random, lucky. I get dates every now and then, or all of a sudden I got 2 dates and then none for a month or something like that, right? So that definitely is a big division between being a beginner and more of an adequate level at this. And let's see, another thing. Okay, yeah, another thing. I almost forgot the last one that I was going to mention is handling situations or objections that come up. So at a beginner level, he'll be very reactive to the girl, not at the cause, but at the effect. So she mentions she has to go to work, or she has a boyfriend, or she's not sure yet, or, whatever, some sort of objection in the interaction. The more of the beginner guys, they kind of bow down, they get reactive, they sort of bail out. Whereas at a more intermediate or adequate level, you know how to handle these sort of things that come up, these objections, these situations. You become more of a problem solver in the moment, overcoming each thing that comes up versus, all right, I'm just going to bail out, or I guess it didn't work out. You become more of a, more navigating in the moment versus just bailing when you don't know what to do, or when things don't go over perfectly smooth every time. So that's a very, very big one, is handling objections, handling situations that arise within each interaction. So yeah, that's pretty much a list of some major, things that kind of divide a beginner and somebody who's more of an adequate or intermediate stage at this. And so, yeah, until next time.